Hey everyone, Wanderbot here, and I'm joined by Benstar, the developer of Revita. I describe what it is, but I think you're going to be a much, I guess, a much better authority on what Revita is.
Sure. So Revita is a twin-stick platformer roguelite, similar to games like Enter the Gungeon, Binding of Isaac, but in a 2D space, with the main gimmick mechanic being that you can trade in your HP for your upgrades, kind of creating this interesting risk-reward kind of game flow where you're constantly trading in your HP to get stronger and stronger, while also being careful to not trade in too much because it puts you into more dangerous situations.
I love that. I know I've said this before, very recently, I guess, but the idea of just getting rid of any kind of currency system, no shop, you don't have to worry about coinage. It's just purely give and take on health. I know you had mentioned the comparison kind of with you said the inspiration for the kind of health system was Hollow Knight and a little bit of Monolith, right? Okay.
Yep.
So, I guess, here, let's sidestep that a little bit. What were the big influences beyond those two, or is it really just kind of that?
So I think that question is always interesting. I've seen it in some like when I think we got approached for like a magazine interview at some point. And they also had that question. Every time this question comes up, I'm like, this is such a hard question.
Yeah.
Primarily because like Revita at this point has like such a long development history behind it, and there's like I as a person have changed so much over those years.
Yeah.
That there's just so many inspirations. Like obviously, like
You can't just point at one.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a bunch of roguelites that I've played over the years, and like every single one of basically every game I've played in that time, to some degree or another, inspires.
Yeah,
inspires.
I mean, it makes
Revita.
sense. It's human to experience something and try and take from that in some meaningful manner, and I can absolutely see how that would affect game development a lot. But at the same time, Revita has plenty of like individual personality within that. I mean, even just the expression of like no currency, just health as the currency, either spending your current HP or even your maximum hearts. Like that throws me off constantly. I mean, you were watching yesterday with with me doing just a couple of runs on the latest patch and just getting absolutely clobbered because you'd be like, here's a thing that costs 3 hearts. It's okay, you'll be fine. Just don't take a couple of hits and maybe you'll recover it back. And so I'd always go for the best possible item, and then, I mean, I think I pulled it off like a 50-50 time, but that was 50% of the time. There we go. But, you know, I had an okay success rate, but the idea of that is genius, because, yeah, most games, when you pick up a power-up, it's kind of dispassionate. It's like, okay, I want this pedestal or this pedestal. You know, I don't really want the range up. Let's go with the damage up. And this one, it's just like, well, do I really want to go for that big damage up if it's going to put me back down at 0 HP? Or should I upgrade that charm radius all the way? You know, is that actually going to be worth it, or am I going to be hamstrung health-wise for the entire run? And right. I think that's really cool. So, you've been working on this for 5 years now?
Yeah, 4 to 5 years.
Okay. And you'd said you started this in, like, high school. Was this, like, early high school, or is it kind of, like, later in high school where you're trying to figure out what your overall life plan was going to be, you know, looking at colleges and stuff?
Definitely late high school. Because I for one, I didn't go to any college. So
you just jumped straight into indie dev then?
Yeah.
Wow.
Which I personally probably would not recommend.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, I think it was last or second to last year of high school where I really got into game development. Like before, I think, yeah, directly before I was working, like I got into games due to like Nintendo, etc. I was like, ooh, I wanna make my own games. I want to come up with my own ideas for these characters. So originally, I got into it due to fan games and stuff. So I was working on like a Paper Mario fan game.
Ooh.
For I think 2 years. Which actually got quite decent towards the end. Like if I look back at it, I'm still like, yeah, I'm kind of proud of where that got left off. But then I got into like, but what if I make my own game and I can potentially sell it at some point? I can make my own worlds and stuff like that. So that's when I started working on Revita, which back then was called Aerodynamic.
Huh. Any specific reason, or is it just kind of in terms of like the pacing and the jumping and whatnot?
So originally, the game was envisioned kind of like as like still a 2D platformer roguelite inspired by probably Binding of Isaac, which I think I've played around that time. Wanting to make something similar in that vein, but like as a 2D platformer, because at the time there weren't any out there that were like in the 2D platformer space. So I came up with this mechanic of like, wouldn't it be interesting if like instead of just a gun, it's like a bow and arrow. So you have like you can like charge up the arrow like with different powers, and then like the arrow would be affected differently by gravity, making like an interesting like kind of like trick shot, I guess, esque flow to it.
Okay.
So that's where the name came from.
Why did you move away from that then? Just kind of inconvenient and it wasn't letting you really play as much as you wanted to?
I think for one, a lot of it was just like I think there's like this typical thing in game development where there's a point where you get bored with a thing and then you just want to redo it all over again.
Makes sense. I mean, I do that with all sorts of things. I have like 50 dozen half-finished video essays, and those take not even like a tenth the time to make a game, so like I can totally see why you get partway through and be like, never mind on this.
Yeah, so with Aerodynamic, I just got to a point where I was like, I don't like this anymore. I don't remember what the exact reasoning was, because the game got even as far as going through Steam Greenlight back in the days, which, whoops, that never happened.
Is the Greenlight page still around?
That's a good question. Probably. But yeah, obviously that didn't go anywhere. But then it went through like a lot of iteration, because that when like after high school was done, I started an apprenticeship to become a graphic designer. And I had a lot of school involved with it. So during that time, I went through a lot of like iteration, and I was like, no, I'm not super happy with this. At some point, Revita was like a kind of like a beat 'em up game where you had like a sword or like less beat 'em up, more like a hack and slash platformer roguelite. And then at some point later down the line, I think probably like 3 years ago, maybe even 4. My time estimation capabilities are not
it gets
that great.
Blurry, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, at some point around that time, I settled with the current concept of like defeating enemies, getting health back, and then spending that health on progression.
Okay. So I assume you left your graphic design apprenticeship by the wayside to switch over. Like,
yeah.
What inspired the switch and taking all the risk to become an indie dev? Because like, I mean, I know some of that. Just I did like 1 year in game design, and I was like, oh man, I got laid off. Let's start applying for jobs, and I'll work on YouTube on the side. And then just one of those worked out, and one of those did not. But I assume it was probably a little bit more risky on your end.
I think so. So when high school came to an end, I was like, I really like graphic design. I still really like graphic design.
I mean, it shows.
So I applied for a graphic design apprenticeship, and then that started. But the big issue I have as just a person in general, I'm a big workaholic.
Yep.
When it comes to game development. Which comes with the problem that then in the graphic design apprenticeship, I had to decide whether to work on school stuff or work on the game, which then ended up just me doing both, which just as a general thing is not great for general physical health nor mental health. because it just led to me constantly working and not really getting any sleep.
Yep.
And that tied with the school feeling very much like a repeat, because like I basically have the highest high school graduation type in Germany. We have like a 3-tiered kind of high school system. But the apprenticeship started with like the second tier graduation, which means a lot of the stuff that was in there was basically just repeat of what I've already done.
Yep.
Which that tied with just a lot of the new subjects in general, teachers not being great, led to me feeling like this is kind of like a waste of time.
Yep.
And that tied with the thing of like, yeah, I can become a graphic designer, but that in itself is also not the safest type of work anyway.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm like, you know what? If I'll take the risk, I'll just take the risk on the stuff that I can't stop working on.
Yeah, makes sense.
So
better than burning yourself out on something you don't enjoy. And just, I mean, clearly
Definitely.
Revita is making it somewhere.
One would hope, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's kind of a good segue to one of my other questions was, so it's super obvious that you're still quite the workaholic,
Yes.
judging by, just your active hours, and you were just like, we can do this interview whenever because it's not going to make a difference. I'm going to be working pretty much all the time anyway. So do you currently have much of a like physical fitness and mental wellness routine of some sort, or is it just kind of do whatever, and because you love your job, it's just easier to put that stuff kind of to the side for now?
It's basically, for me at the moment, it's very much do whatever. I don't have like a real routine. Like obviously a lot of my time at the moment is work. In parts, for one, because I love the work I do.
Yep.
Especially now that it's in early access and I have like a direct feedback kind of loop with the people playing the game. But also just in general, like, I don't know how it hasn't happened yet, but I haven't been burned out on this project once.
Yeah.
And I'm still super motivated, which, I mean, I might burn out at some point. One would hope not. But at least so far, even with the hours I'm working, which are ridiculous, I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
Like I'm mentally doing fine. I'm physically, I think I'm doing fine. So far it's okay.
As someone that I'm pretty sure I'm fairly similar to you in a lot of these things. I think you've got until you're 30 before it really starts hitting you, and then it might.
Yeah.
But like, I was perfectly fine up until lockdown. Like I work day in, day out, and it wasn't until like everything shut down in the US and like couldn't go out and had no social life, and work was just starting to feel like very loopy here, where it's just like wake up, play game, put out vid, go bed, repeat. Like that's when it finally started to get to me. But I think with Revita, you're constantly kind of improving and iterating on that one thing, and it keeps getting better and better, so there's that feeling of constant progress. So I don't know, you might never burn out, and then you'll be done with Revita and you'll be on to your probably Paper Mario successor or something.
We'll see. But yeah, definitely. It's like, I think Revita has the kind of like big quote unquote problem of being like the first commercial project, right? So like it's like, for one, it's the first commercial project, but there's also a publisher behind it. So it's like, and it's like this weird thing where as I develop it, trying to figure out how everything works as well.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not the most healthiest process. But I do hope that, like, for example, like if there's a second project, or if there's more for Revita later down the line, etc., like once that block is done, basically the full release, that I can like reassess things and then be like, okay, now we can we can set up a healthier work schedule.
We can do it right the second time around. I'm doing it well enough now, but yeah. I've heard from a number of developers, their first game put them on the map, but never quite hit the level of success that their second game did. I guess I was watching an interview with Greg Lobanov from Chicory, and he said, pretty much a number of people acknowledged that Wandersong existed, but the moment that Chicory was even on like anyone's radar, suddenly all of these people that had just kind of, passed them by, were suddenly, like, super interested. So I'm not going to say Revita is cursed in that regard, but I think it's going to be one of those that eventually, if you do manage to, that's a little doom and gloom, but when you work on your next...
while working.
If you don't, if you don't burn out or anything like that, I'm sure so many doors are going to be open with every successive project. Frankly, I'm super impressed. For effectively your first game on the market, no experience with like a studio beforehand, and all of this, like you've managed to hit so many things that so many developers have never managed or almost never managed to reach already, and like that's really cool.
Thank you.
So, you mentioned working with a publisher. How did that work out? Because I've worked with Dear Villagers myself like a couple of times, and so I was kind of surprised when you got picked up by them.
So that was actually a very, very interesting process, like good and bad. So the whole publisher thing basically started during the apprenticeship, which that was kind of like the thing of like, I hope this works out. So as I would assume as usual, what it is was basically I applied for a whole bunch of publishers and was like, hey, we got this project. Would you be interested? Here's like a fact sheet of what it's about, what we're planning. Here's a demo. I was not very smart about how to do that because for one, I went in way too early. I kind of regret doing it that early because like the demo back then wasn't great. It wasn't where it is now mechanically even. Like it was a fairly different game. There was like a reload mechanic similar to Enter the Gungeon. It was terrible. Okay. But so I went to a bunch of publishers. I sent them the pitch basically. None of them basically were interested, or if they were interested, they were like, yeah, we think this could be interesting, but we don't think there's a market for this. Which, to be fair, especially at the time, still is the case. There's a lot of roguelites. The market is very much oversaturated in general. And kind of like being the one that kind of like pulls through and shines through the rest of the crowd is not easy. But then at some point, like one of the publishers I was talking to was Dear Villagers, and they were like, hey, this is really cool. We would be interested in talking more. And then we talked more, and then here we are today.
I mean, makes sense. I guess the first time I ever interacted with him, I think, was Neurovoider, and then they had done Scourgebringer, so I can definitely see why they would have been interested in Revita just based on that similarity alone. Though both games are wildly different when you actually get into the thick of things.
But funnily enough, that was like when I applied to them, or when I was pitching to them, that was like one of my main worries was like, because like the thing with Scourgebringer and Revita were very, very much developed in like parallel, by which I mean like they were not really inspired by each other. They just happened to like visually, like on first glance, have like a very similar appeal to them. So I was like kind of worried. I was like, dang, they basically already have like a similar game like that. Like, why would they pick up Revita? But then they picked it up. I was like, well, I'm not going to complain.
Yeah. It also makes sense from like their own... I actually don't know if publishers really develop much for fan bases. I guess Devolver Digital definitely has like a fan base.
Yeah.
I don't know about some of the... I'm not going to say B-tier publishers because that's... I think for a number of the other publishers, it's just kind of whatever. But like, I know from my perspective, I don't mind. But I think you all are also benefiting somewhat from the fact that as far as roguelikes go, most roguelike fans are super voracious for more roguelikes as long as they're good and not more deck builders. The moment you put cards into Revita is the moment I think a number of people are going to be like, it's a Slay the Spire clone, and you can't escape that. But, as long as you don't do that, I think you're fine.
To be fair, those are currently doing very well.
Yeah, they are. It's just, it is a struggle every single time I have a new deck builder. I have to like justify its existence before even justifying the game as like a good product.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I can't get enough of them, but there is that kind of growing resentment. Whereas, like, as far as where Revita stands in the market, there's pretty much just Scourgebringer, which honestly, like, feels completely different.
Yeah.
It's such a weird beast.
Yeah,
so bad at it.
It's structurally very different. It goes for like a different feel in general. It's like more of an like an I guess I could say like more of like an arcade game. Like
Yeah.
in its structure, it's like very much like, oh, you play it every once in a while. It's like very fast runs, and it's like just very very actiony. While Revita's like more like while Revita's also like actiony because I mean there's a lot of shooting going on. It's I feel like Revita is more about the when I would describe Revita, it was more like it's more about the world, more about the characters, the personality, but also gameplay wise, it's more about the whole choice thing.
Yeah.
Where you make like different choices and stuff, which is there's some of that in Scorchbringer, but I mean that's obviously not the focus of it.
Yeah. And I'd also say Revita has that really, I'm gonna call it that like delicious roguelite upgrades keep stacking on top of each other to become progressively more interesting. And I find like I am drawn to those roguelikes way more than the ones that are, I'm gonna say, more like base mechanic focused. I imagine playing Binding of Isaac if your shots never changed. I don't know if anybody would have ever been interested in that game. So yeah, I'm always craving that like really ridiculous combo. The charm flame aura that I was trying to pull off yesterday obviously didn't work so hot for me, but
that's so much fun.
Yeah, it's such a cool idea, and like I wish I had been good enough to keep it going just to see where I could have taken that. And
yes, me.
Well, and I was just gonna say I think that's a very high strength for roguelikes of like Revita's caliber, and a lot of games don't really match that. You know, they say they're a roguelike, but they don't have that, and I'd hate to like gatekeep and say like you're not a real roguelike unless you have ridiculous scaling power-up systems, but like I need a term for that for like describing roguelikes, because they're that is what draws me to the genre again and again and again and again. And like half these roguelikes don't have it. I'm just like, oh, but it needs it. It needs something.
Yeah, I mean I'm definitely on the same position there. I mean, one of the main reasons I go was like this could be like interesting, like market wise, because like a lot of the recent roguelites especially like tend to go away from that. I'm like, and I am too like in the position where I'm like, but that's what makes them interesting. Variety and the build making, that's the stuff that makes them interesting. If you don't have any variety in your runs, like why am I supposed to play the game more than till I've beaten the game and that's it?
Yeah, I've done that with a number of roguelikes where it's just like I beat it for the first time and then I never touch it again, because it's just like any subsequent run is just going to be either harder but the same, or just the same, not even harder. And it's just like I don't really see the point of picking this up. Whereas yeah, I know with Revita, Binding of Isaac, you know, so many of these top tier roguelikes, it's, oh hey, every run is going to be different. Is it going to be good for me? I don't know. You know, am I going to have the arcing shot and then have a giant spike wall that I have to like somehow whiz shots over and then probably die? Like, you know, sometimes it fails on me, but sometimes you get the, oh god, what? It was the shotgun with the bullet propagation. I thought that was a really cool combo, and I was really hoping I could have taken that run longer, because I feel like that could have been equally cool for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, and I mean, I also like the other thing that then like when Neon Abyss came out, right? And that goes for a similar thing. In my opinion, it doesn't go far enough with it. It keeps it like, it has a lot of items, but it keeps it very simple in its upgrades. It's like, oh, you get like more bullets, and like, oh, your gun gets stronger, stuff like that. Which is fine. I personally would like to see like more weird stuff.
Yeah.
But that game blew up. Like if you look at like the stream reviews and stuff, like that game did very well. And I was like, okay, I can see there being like like there being like a spot for Revita somewhere
Yeah.
for people to get interested in it.
I guess we've been doing an amount of comparisons. I compare things all the time, but I always feel weird about it all the same. But
Right.
the one issue I always ran into with that game was the runs kept getting longer and longer, and they got
Yeah.
less and less exciting. And yeah, going back to the idea of like just getting damage ups, nothing disappoints me more than doing like a run of a roguelike, and all I've managed to accrue is just more damage.
Yep.
So I was gonna compliment the little sword power-ups that you have that just kind of drop randomly. It's not like you open a chest and, you know, the vast majority of the things that you get out of chests are just equivalents of those, like, 5% damage ups. Like, that does nothing for anybody and isn't really that interesting for run unless you get, like, 50 of them, at which point you're absurd. But
Right.
that nothing disappoints me more in a roguelike where I just pick up an upgrade and all it is just like a small damage bonus. And then the next upgrade is the same. And you just keep doing that over and over again. And it's just like, but I want something fun. You know, I want a double shot. I want bouncing bullets. I want bullets that do something that catch me by surprise and then scale with something else. And so I really liked your solution of just having those sword drops as the damage ups that just kind of happen here and there. And yeah, a number of the interesting items also have stat adjustments, but it's not just that.
Yeah, I think that was also like one of my main like ideas, I guess, when going into the item system was like, I don't want to have it be that every item is a stat up because it just gets very boring. And like, yes, Revita has basic stat ups because I think they're kind of like you need to have some basic stat up upgrades because like they're also interesting and like depending on your build you might want to have those. But like then otherwise like we do have like a bunch of damage ups in Revita, but they all come with like some caveat or some way to change up the gameplay to get that damage up. Like for example, there's like the Tormented Mask Relic, which is like, yeah, you get a lot more damage, but like enemies also deal 50% more damage.
Yeah.
Or like a thing where it's like if you dodge like very closely through the enemies, then you get like a damage up. Like a lot of conditional stuff.
Yeah.
Which I think is more interesting. And
Absolutely.
to go back to like the sword pickups, those are also like very inspired by Monolith. Again, like like that game had like this very smart decision to be like, we need to have some sort of damage scaling without making the damage ups feel too important, I guess, or like too annoying, too frustrating, like in the sense of like you just see damage ups for your upgrades or you need to take damage ups as upgrades. So we just do it in a way where like they're still to some degree like bound to like how you do in the game because like if you do better then you see more of them. But they're just like a minor thing you just pick up along the way rather than like a big celebration, which I think is very neat.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm going to just bounce to a random question on the list. I always making these giant lists, but then I get kind of choice paralysis of like, what do I ask next? Anyway, I guess here's one. This is one that I always want to ask of everybody. What is the most jank thing that you've had to do while making Revita to keep things running smoothly? You know, some kind of weird bit of spaghetti code that you felt particularly, I'm not going to say off-put by, or just like, oh gosh, I mean, I've done it before where I didn't have a mic stand, and so I like propped a mic up on a bunch of cardboard boxes for the time being, and that was a thing for a while.
Right. It's difficult. Like if I had to think like on the spot, be like, what would be like janky code in the game? I don't feel like there is a lot of interesting jank code because like one of, I guess, benefits and issues that I have, I'm also like very much a perfectionist. I'm like, this code needs to be well written, otherwise it's gonna bite me in the ass later. But if we like take the jank definition, open it up a little bit, like I think the most interesting thing code-wise that we have in the game is like how the procedural generation works, which like I'm still shocked that actually worked out, because it feels like a thing that's like if like when I started out and I thought about like how would that even work, I was like I have no clue, so just started like making it randomly generate like geometry and like basically just rectangles, and then just started like modifying like the conditions for it. And then at some point it just worked out, and now we have like a functioning procedural generation system that just keeps generating new rooms.
So the rooms are 100% procedurally generated
Yep.
every single time? Wow.
Yep.
Frankly, I was just assuming it was like Binding of Isaac where all the rooms are handmade and you just choose from like a random list of them. That's actually really impressive.
Yeah, the only exceptions being I guess special rooms, like for example,
yeah.
like the introduction room when you get into a new area, like shops and stuff, boss
Yeah.
rooms. But the main enemy rooms, those are all fully generated.
Wow. Today I learned. Yeah, you honestly fooled me with that one, because yeah, I just assumed you just made like a dozen of them, or not a dozen of them, dozens of them, and just you're like, yeah, this room next. But
Yeah,
that's
that was the original plan, but then I was like, I need to know how level design works for that, and also I need to spend a lot of time on this, and I was like, I could just generate them, which was a very naive way of thinking about it, because like I then spent the next few months just working on the procedural generation, which that was a lot of work, but like in the end it's like, yes, it saves a ton of time, because I could just, for like a new area, I can just add new components to the system, or like tweak like how big should the rooms be. Like for example, like I don't think you've seen that area yet, but like there's like an alternative area to the second area, which is like very vertical, so like there's a lot of platforming.
I think I might just have to turn the half damage thing on just so I can actually see more stuff without worrying about death. There are some roguelikes that I can absolutely just like waltz through with no problem, and that is pretty much Hades, and then everything else not so much. So
but I mean, the options is there for a reason, right? Like if one wants to use them, that's perfectly fine.
So what where did you get the idea for all of the accessibility options? Because I realize that it's becoming much more of a trend lately, and it's something that I absolutely adore, especially, you know, as I get older, slower, and lazier. You know, it's nice being able to turn the game down to... Right. I think I've got it permanently locked at 90% speed, and it doesn't even feel like that. And I really like that. And, so yeah, I guess just accessibility options, like, what inspired you to even put them in the first place, and do you have any that you're kind of hoping to put in at some point?
I think the biggest inspiration, or kind of like the thing that made me really think about it, was Eagle Island, which is like just so many accessibility options to the point where I'm like, I don't even know where I would take the time to implement all of them.
I need to play that game again, because I actually got into an argument with a developer over those accessibility options in the beta, more or less being like, holy shit, the beta was just so brutal, and I couldn't beat it or like do well, and I was just like, I need some settings to make this functional. I don't know if I can claim any credit for them being added, but that game, night and day compared to like what I had played originally to what it is now, and those accessibility settings are incredible. Anyway,
they did a phenomenal job. Like, if there's like one, which is kind of weird to say, like the standout thing about a game is like the accessibility options, but it is true. Like, the game itself is fantastic, but like just the amount of accessibility options and just the amount of care and time that went into this is just exceptional. And I've not seen a game do something to that degree.
I am always a huge proponent for accessibility options, just because, I mean, obviously I like to be able to play every game into my 60s and 70s without having to worry about crappy hands preventing me from playing. But like, anytime I load up a game nowadays, I will straight up like open the options. I mean, one of my original inspirations was like Total Biscuit, and he'd always open the options first and look at them, and I don't think I ever get to that extent. But I always look for the accessibility page just to see if it's there, and anytime that is, there is one, I'm like, yes, this makes me so happy. It doesn't even need to be a good game, but the moment it has those accessibility options, I'm like, you were instantly at least 20% better, just because you consider that, you know, maybe not everybody can play the game as the developer intended.
Right. And I mean, at the end of the day, like, by adding those accessibility options, I'm basically saying, no, you can play that way, and it's still as intended, because that's, I want you to enjoy the gameplay, and as long as you can do that, why shouldn't you be able to?
Smart. I appreciate it. So, are there any accessibility options you kind of want to put in at some point, or what you got is mostly what you got for the time being?
I mean, for now, I think what we got is like mostly what's like planned at the moment. There obviously there are other things that could be done, like for example, like different like color blindness modes, etc. But that brings in the issue of like that's just a lot of time. That like as nice as these settings are and stuff, like they do take up time in development. And Revita being like a game that very much came out of me starting up development, it has like a lot of like baggage to it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's like like a lot of accessibility things to some degree, especially some of them need to be planned from the get-go, which wasn't the case. So like retroactively adding them makes it fairly tricky, but like obviously with like smaller things, etc. Like I think like which update? I don't know. I think the first content update added like a bunch of new accessibility options, like for example like being able to turn off like the foreground elements in case like they're
I saw
annoying.
that. I thought that was really cool. I won't do it because I like looking them, but I thought that was cool.
Or like slightly tweaking like the camera zoom in enemy rooms, like stuff like that, which is like these are fairly easy to implement, so why not just implement them? So yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Gosh, I had a segue and then I've lost it at this point. You were talking about implementing things just in general. Have you ever like tried to implement something and it just turned into a time sink in a negative manner? Because right, you're talking about the procedural generation in the rooms, and you said you spent months on that, but it paid off. Was there anything that like was not worth it, that you put a lot of time in and it just never worked, or like the beta reaction was just like, this is bad, please change it?
I mean, I could argue like the first 3 years of development have been that, because those games literally never came to be. Let me. I don't think there's like anything specific where I was like, no, this wasn't worth it, because I'm the type of person who's like, even if it's like a small thing, like it took me 10 days to add some dumb particle effects that nobody's gonna notice, I'll be like, no, this is necessary. Because like I'm so addicted to like polishing. Yeah. I'm like, no, this like lamp needs to have physics to it. Nobody will notice it, but it needs to be there.
I will try and make a minute. Next time I pass that lamp, let me know, and I will see.
But yeah, there's like a lot of like tiny details and stuff in Ravita that probably like most people wouldn't notice, but I'm like, no, I want that to be in there, because like I'm like a very visual developer, I guess. Like I go from like more of like a visual perspective than like a technical perspective. So I'm like,
I mean, you started
I want this to look good, like at all times. So I'm very like in love with like tiny details and stuff. So yeah, I wouldn't say like there was anything where it'd be like, oh, this was a waste of time, and I would like to like go back and like not do that.
Okay. So I guess Wild Left Turn, you more or less have kind of your own composer for this. Right. How did you meet him, and like how did that kind of work out?
That's a very interesting story, I guess. So back when I was working on the Paper Mario fan game, I was looking for a composer, or another composer, because like a friend of mine was also doing music, but we were like, no, this project needs more, which is like, at that time I was also not a good game director, or producer. So I didn't do the smartest moves, but that's fine, because I was like,
you were a high schooler.
First project learning. Yeah. So I reached out to Chris / this Omicron on YouTube, because he's done some like Mario and Luigi game remixes back then. I was like, oh, these are really good. Like, would you be interested in like helping out on like a fan game? And they said yes. And that's how we started working together. And then we did like a bunch of like game jams and stuff, and then I was like, this music is so good.
It
Would you
really
like to work
is.
in Revita?
I-
It's fantastic.
I am honestly consistently blown away every time I load it up, just how perfect the soundtrack is for it. It's like, you know, playing Celeste. The soundtrack for Celeste 100% matches Celeste. Like, that is a perfect match. Revita's soundtrack is functionally perfect.
I also just love how unique it is. Like, I talked with the composer recently about it, and we were like, what genre would this music fit in? And we both just decided, yeah, it's just Revita music.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's so all over the place, but at the same time fits so well. It's like I don't know what it is, but it works really well.
I don't even think about genres anymore, but then again, most of the music I listen to is just game soundtracks.
Yeah.
Like the Revita soundtrack. Let's see. So, I obviously work with, shoot. I had his name, and Christoph. So you worked with Christoph for a while, clearly, if you've been kind of working with him since... since that Paper Mario thing. I know you have a community manager. Do you have anybody else working with you or for you beyond obviously the publisher?
So we have five people, I think. So for one, Chris is working on the music and sound design. We have Pete, who's in charge of all the writing in the game, or at least like all the character dialogue or the dialogue in general. Well, I work on like just the menu stuff, and item descriptions and such. We have Ship, who is like a secondary pixel artist, and is like, now that we're in early access, is like pretty much like not really secondary pixel artist, more like main pixel artist. They're doing like a lot of the environment stuff. Like they do like all the boss room backgrounds. They did like a lot of the enemies in Area 3. So like they do a lot of the art stuff now, and they also did the artwork for the game. And then we also have Capuchin, who's a community manager.
Okay. Now, they all like full-time Revita employees, or just kind of you send them tasks and they get them done?
Yeah, it's more like a freelance thing.
Okay.
So like they have their own stuff going on the side, and I'm like, every once in a while I'm like, hey, would you be available time-wise to work on this thing?
Okay. I'm reaching the point where I'm gonna have to hire assistants just to keep my channel going, and so I'm trying to figure out how that will work. Anyway, that's cool. So did you pick? I mean, obviously you started working with Christoph beforehand. Were all of these people pretty much mostly post release on Steam?
Not. I'm trying to remember. I think Ship joined during like before early access launch. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely, because they worked on the background for the third area, which was in the early access. But then the other two joined later on, and I met them through the publisher because I was like, hey, I might potentially need like a writer because my writing is not great at all. I'm not a writer. And we have a bunch of dialogue in the game and potentially a lot of world building story stuff later on. That I alone am not able to put like I have a vision and I know what I want to do, but I need help putting it on paper.
Okay.
And then Capuchin, like our community manager, was also through the publisher because like we were like, yeah, so we're like when we're in early access and people are playing the game, we need someone who can kind of take care of like a lot of the social media stuff on the Revita account, and also help out with like community events and stuff, because like I need to work on the game and I have very limited time.
Yep. Yeah, running a community is hard, which I guess speaking of, you've got a fairly decent community from what I've seen, as far as like, I mean, obviously number of people, but also general content wholesomeness. I don't know. how did you come to like grow the community initially? Because I know a number of developers that have nothing and don't like really focus on it, and it seems like yours is kind of fairly natural. I guess you do
Right.
you do have the hat competition going on right now
Yeah.
to drag people in a little bit.
I mean, originally it started with like, to go back to the lovely fan game. It originally started as like a server for like the Paper Mario fan game.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of people interested via that. So like when, like at the peak of that, like before we switched over to the Revita server, I think the server already had like roughly 400 members, I think.
Okay.
So that's quite a lot. So that helped like a lot, like getting like more people invested because like there are already people there that are talking. And then like obviously like through early access and like we have like the Discord like on the main menu of the game.
Yeah.
So like if you start the game, like that's gonna be one of the first things you see. So we got like a lot of people via that, but like also via like Twitter and stuff because like fairly active on Twitter, with like a bunch of people. So yeah.
Okay. Now, how active was your community? Like, obviously, when you made the switch over to really putting out Revita, I know you were running like a really long alpha that I think was almost entirely through the Discord. Time's getting a little bit blurry here. Did that actually like work out really well for you? Mainly, I just know a lot of developers have some trouble getting that like initial conversion, and I'm really curious how well having that like pre-built community and like community focus worked out or didn't.
Yeah, so the alpha, I think, started after the so we announced the game last year at the Steam Autumn Festival, I think.
I think so, yeah. That's when I first played it.
So that we released a demo with that, which already got like a little bit of attention. Obviously, it's like a free thing, so you know why not try it out. So we got a bit of attention through that, and obviously we also had the announcement at the same time, and be like, hey, this game is now a thing. Please look at it. Thank you. And then afterwards with the alpha, like till the early access release. So like through, I think October to March, I want to say. With like updates in between there as well. And yeah, I would say that definitely helped like getting people interested. So we got like most people in through the demo because I think we already announced at the demo that there would be an alpha. So we got a bunch of people to stick around in the Discord, and those people then became like alpha testers.
That's smart.
And started playing the game. Yeah. And then obviously that
write that down,
helped
actually.
a lot. That helped out a lot with like getting like the community going.
Yeah, because I've seen a lot of discourse back and forth with the whole like demos are actually bad. Like you don't want to do demos they'll hurt your game sales, or they'll convert a bunch of like wish lists, but they won't actually turn into the real thing. And I don't know, sales math is hell, but it's
tricky. Yeah. Like I think like we had the benefit obviously like that there was no game to buy yet. So the question is like I'm also constantly considering like maybe it could be interesting to have like another demo. Because like obviously like at it stands currently, like while I wouldn't say that Revita is fairly expensive, especially compared to other games, like it's still a hefty price for someone who like doesn't know if he likes the game or not.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like still like I'm still thinking like maybe it would be interesting to have like another demo at some point, so we can get people interested who otherwise like would be like, nah, like this could be interesting, but it's like $15 and I don't know if it's that interesting. But yeah, I don't know. Like maybe it would reflect negatively on sales because people would like, yeah, I like this, but I've played enough. I don't need to play more.
Yeah.
Which I don't know.
I wonder if you could do a demo with like a sale. I don't know.
I mean,
I
potentially.
it's I am not the kind of person that should probably be thinking about this too hard just
Mm.
because, none of it reflects on me, so I should never give ideas, but it's just something I see often. I'm on the game dev Reddit, and it's like
Mm.
fairly big discourse over there talking about these sorts of things. And so I'm always curious how different developers do it. And it definitely seems like having the more community focus is worthwhile. At least
Yeah, I
probably
think.
worthwhile.
Yeah, I think it also like it obviously also comes down to like what type of game the game is.
Yeah.
Like if you have like for example like a lot of story games currently do like the whole prologue demo thing, and they have like a prologue as like a separate quote unquote game, which works fairly well because like it gets you interested in the story, but because you're in for the story, like
Yeah.
you're not you want to know more, and the demo kind of like works more so like as a hook to get you interested in the story.
I will agree with that. I've been eyeballing the game, came out today, I think, called Chris Tales, which I played like an hour of the first hour of the game with the demo, last year. And now that the game's out, I'm just kind of like, I don't really know if I want to go through that again. Like, you have to get over that initial hump of playing through all of that content over again. It's not as bad with roguelikes, especially, and yeah, the prologues, because it's all new. You don't really feel like, oh man, I've been here, I've done this before. I mean, I guess you can feel that with a roguelike, but at that point, you're probably not the target audience.
Yeah, like one thing I've been thinking of, and I mean, I don't know if this will ever happen. It might happen, it might not happen. But like one thing I thought that might be interesting is like what if, because like roguelikes generally don't really have demos, so if they do, they're like super limited, because like you don't have a lot. Usually you don't have a lot of content in a roguelike, as in like stuff to show, because like it's more around like replayability. So I was thinking like maybe it could be just interesting to have like a demo that's like basically the full game, but it limits you at some point. So you get like into like the structure of things, right? But like you're stopped, like for example, like after the first or second area. So like you get to see like how the game kind of evolves to some degree, but kind of like gets you hooked in the idea of like, yeah, but I want to see more of the game, right? But like you already are like invested in like unlocks and stuff, and which could be interesting. But I mean,
I think I could throw out ideas left and right, like potentially even having like a hand-designed run, that you only get X number of choices, but they're some of the more cool items to really showcase what the game could be. And then it stops after, maybe even right before the ice boss or something. No, that would probably be disappointing. Obviously, like, whatever you come up with is probably going to be 1,000 times better than this, but yeah, I don't know. I'm curious about whether or not another demo would work for you.
Yeah, it's like, I think like to go into like a little bit more of the nitty gritty, which I don't know how interesting that actually is, but like
that's part of the reason why I want to do this. Like, I'm not interested in the surface level stuff after a certain point. Like, we're 53 minutes into this. Get nitty and gritty.
Okay then. So I think like one of the big issues that Revita has at the moment, it's like and I don't know for when the people listen to this, like if that is still the case, who knows? But at least at the moment, I think the big issue that Revita has, it's like at the point where like the people who play it really like it, but like the audience is like kind of like in a bubble, where it's like we're not at the point yet where like just people like talking about the game like spreads the game around. So it's like a thing where I'm like, it might be interesting just to get more people in, because like the people who do play it really like it. Like from what I've seen at least, really like it. But people just don't get to see the game. So it seems like very much like a visibility issue, in which case like a demo might really help.
Yeah.
But who knows?
Yeah, demos, sales, or, the inevitable 1.0 launch of Revita. I know those are all kind of entrance points. The other thing is straight up just eventually, I'm gonna wager some bigger streamers will pick it up and actually put some time in.
Yeah, it's interesting, because like it's like always like the thing that I don't want the game to become. It's like the cursed thing that I don't want to hear is like the hidden gem description. because it's like the thing where like Monolith is like described as like, oh, that's a hidden gem, and it's like, yeah, but it shouldn't be
It
hidden.
shouldn't be
Like,
a hidden gem.
It's
Yeah.
just a gem. So it's like a thing like where when people start describing the game as like a hidden gem, it's like kind of like, yeah, it's like I'm glad that you like it, but you're also like implying and basically saying like, yeah, nobody has seen the game, which like, it's not great.
Yeah. I'm feeling a bit of shade because I actually have a half-written script for Revita as
It's totally
a
fine.
wildly underrated roguelike.
I'm not saying that it's more like a thing where it's like, I mean, Revita also is like still very much in development, right? Like
Yeah.
this is like more of a thing like when a game is out and like 2 years later, right? Where it's like, and it's like it's not a bad thing. Like I wouldn't hold it against anyone if they say like, oh yeah, this is like a hidden gem. Like, heck yeah. Because like it's already a fact that the game is like, I don't know, like not doing well or whatever. But it's just like a thing where it's like as a developer, it's like a thing where like, and I hope it can be just a gem with the hidden in front of it.
I hope it gets big enough and popular enough to the point where it's no longer hidden. It is the gem. Okay. Well, thanks for that distinction to some degree, because I think I will just drop the whole hidden gem idea from it and just talk about it already as such.
I mean, to be fair, I don't know if that's just like I can obviously not speak for everyone. It's just like a thing where I'm like, and I think it comes to some degree because like I saw Monolith develop, and like I don't like that it's like it has become like this hidden gem kind of game where it's like, no, this game should just get more attention in general because it's so darn good.
It is, yeah.
It's like the thing where I'm like, I don't want to get to that point. But yeah, it's just at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's cool to talk about this purely just because, I don't know, it's kind of fun to see your perspective. Okay. I'm just gonna left turn into something else, unless you want to talk more on that.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So this is actually a segue. How do you deal with negativity? Like, yeah, because I know I asked this largely because it doesn't seem like Revita has much for negative reviews at all. Like I was scrolling down and I saw like one person who misspelled Revita, but that was about it.
Yeah. So I might have referenced that review on Twitter, maybe perhaps, but I don't want to talk about it. No, so I'm not someone who's usually great with dealing with negativity, because I'm like, especially like with Steam reviews, because I'm one of the people who's like, I'm of the opinion like there shouldn't be Steam reviews because they're like mostly not very productive, because like some of the reviews are like they're constructive and like they criticize or note down what they like, what they don't like, etc. and why, but like a lot of them just wind up being like, I like this game,
yep,
thumbs up, or I hate this game, thumbs down. It's like, as a developer, I can't do anything with that.
Yeah.
And like a lot of the negative reviews on Revita right now, and I don't know how shitty that is to say, but like a lot of that stuff is like very much not constructive, or like in the direction of like, I'm sorry that I didn't make the game that you wanted the game to be, kind of thing. Where it's like I wish like I wish like these reviews would be more constructive, or there would be more things that I could actually work with. But most of the time they just end up being like, I don't like this, or like kind of in the sense of like going to like a third person shooter game and writing like at the bottom like, I don't like this because this isn't a platformer.
Yeah.
Like kind of in the lines of like,
that's meaningless.
I'm sorry that you didn't like it because it's like not expected. I can totally understand that you're unhappy with the purchase, but like as a developer, I can't do anything about that. And like obviously like the pointless negativity at someone, like it annoys me because like obviously like with Steam, a lot of how the algorithm treats your game is related to that, or like how people see it, because like the thing you notice it, you fairly easily notice when you go like to like Steam reviews in general for any game, is like all the negative reviews have like the so and so many people found this review helpful,
Yep.
and then the positives don't have that at all. And I'm like, so like now this person who was expecting a totally different game made it so like a bunch of other people who might have been interested didn't actually end up purchasing the game, which is just very annoying. And like obviously also again like the algorithm, like it shows like up on like this there's like the score of like so and so many percent of people left a positive review. So it's like annoying in that regard. And I'm like, I can be like a very petty person where I go to like friends and be like, look at this funny review. But like it's like the negativity itself is not like the issue, because like oftentimes like when it gets too negative, it's just like this is more funny than anything.
Yeah. I always find the people that are only like the people that are really angrily negative I can laugh at, because they're just they're not actually worth my consideration. It's the people that are like well-reasoned or well-written. You're like, oh, this person actually put a lot of thought into this negativity. I actually need to consider this. And then it just eats you.
Right. But it's also like a thing like you brought up the review that misspelled the name like I think like 4 times as Revita with like an I.
Yep.
I was like I would like to take this review seriously, but also like you didn't even check if the name was right, and the name
diligence there. I was looking at that one specifically, and they're talking about like not being able to save, and it's just like
yeah, and like there was a lot of stuff in there where it was like, oh, I don't like the lighting. You can turn it off, but that's not a fix for the problem. Like, but that is a fix for the problem. Like a lot of people like that. So if there's an option for the people who don't like it, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like the options are there for a reason.
It's like saying the accessibility options aren't good enough, that they should have been in the game to begin with. The game should have been 50% speed, because that's my flavor.
Yeah, and I mean, there are people who say that.
Yeah.
That's the thing. There are like a lot of people who say that, and I'm like, yeah, this like shouldn't have been a thing. I'm like, yeah, but it's an option for a reason. Like, it's not gonna be that like if you don't like a thing, just turn it off. Like, I don't know why the thought of something being an option for others is an issue to you.
Yeah. Some people, they defend the pure experience. I'm not going to say to the death, but I've definitely run into a number of people. I'm an unabashed cheater when it comes to certain games. Like, I've been playing through Monster Hunter Stories 2, and nobody's called me out on it yet, but I'm just waiting for somebody to notice that every single egg that I get is perfect. Because
that's brilliant.
I don't want to go out of my way to, like, grind for, like, all of these eggs. No, just give me a perfect monster right from the get-go, so I don't have to, like... I don't know if you ever played much for Pokemon, but the whole EV-IV thing is actually kind of what killed Pokemon for me, because it was just like, oh man, I have like just a subpar Squirtle. This sucks. I guess...
I never got into that part of Pokemon. Like, for me, it was always like very surface level. I'm like, ooh, this monster is cute, and that's where it ended.
Yeah. I did that for a while, but then I think it was Temtem really pulled back the curtain on how it worked and like the nitty-gritty, and so then going back to Sword and Shield, I'm like, oh boy, my starter is just trash, and so we just like didn't use it because it just had the wrong stat alignment and whatever nature, that's what it was, and I was just like, oh, I can't do this. Let's see. Okay.
But yeah, that's totally fine. Like I'm also like a proponent of like if like obviously I think they're like borders to some degree, like of what like in the sense of like what is okay, because like at the end of the day, like I as a developer, I want the game to be enjoyable, right? So like whatever it needs to be for the game to be enjoyable, like do whatever. Like that's where there's like a lot of accessibility options. Like that's why you can like, for example, turn down the enemy damage to 50%, stuff like that. I'm like, I don't really care as long as you enjoy the game. But obviously there's, and I don't know if like some of the complaints in that regard are like well-meaning in regards to like, I'm pretty sure there's also like a point where you can like accidentally like ruin a game for yourself. Like for example, like one of the things like that a lot of I've seen like a lot of roguelites do, or like some of them, or like a general accessibility thing that's currently going around. There was like a giant discussion around Twitter, and in that context, it was like I don't get why there was a discussion to begin with, but like the option of like making yourself like completely invincible, right? And like for example, like could I implement that option in Revita? Yes, like enemies deal 0 damage, but at that point
I
it
think
molds the game
that
into
might go
something
too
completely
far.
different. Because at that point, like the game mechanics fall apart.
Well, yeah,
And, like,
the whole health system in general,
Yeah.
like you still need that risk reward, otherwise
Yeah.
the whole thing that this was built upon is gone.
and it's like a thing, especially with Revita. It's like you might be here for like the world building to some degree, but obviously the main hook is the gameplay. So like there like kind of like limits to that, but otherwise like people care too much about like other people's enjoyment of things.
Yeah, it's true. So I guess let's actually take a left turn, seeing as we were talking about negativity. What is something that you're super proud of, but can't fit into a conversation normally? This doesn't have to be Revita, it can be kind of anything you want.
I'll probably make it Revita related anyway.
Okay, that's fine.
I think I brought it up earlier, but I think it's just like my extreme attention to detail when it comes to like game development and like the polish of it. Well, I'm like, yes, it is like kind of detrimental when it comes to like deadlines and stuff. But I'm just so proud of a lot of like the small details that would otherwise otherwise you wouldn't really pay attention to or wouldn't get noticed. But like without them, it feels like there's something lacking. Like for example, like a lot of the platforming in Revita, I'm very proud of because like there's a lot of like tiny details. Like for example, if you hold down the jump, like at the peak of the jump, like you're held there for like a few frames longer than otherwise, and it just makes everything feel like a little bit nicer. Like how if you press the jump button slightly before hitting the ground, you still jump anyway. Like a lot of like tiny details that you wouldn't notice really, but you would notice if they weren't there.
Yeah, I think I have noticed. I think it's thrown me off a little bit because I've played a number of platformers that don't have some of these, and so I'm so used to them being weird and bad. And so yeah, having Revita be an actually like incredibly well-made platformer, without like, I'm not gonna say it's not really a platformer, but it's not like Mario levels of like, boy, you have to like a Kaizo Mario, but. I love the idea of that little bit of hang time. My favorite, honestly, will always be just the fact that you can shoot down for the boost jump.
Yeah.
That's like a much more like specific game mechanic that I think everybody that plays the game should, know and learn how to abuse. But that move itself is just so cool, and I really wish more games had that because that is such a neat mechanic for like traversal, for that little bit of extra height. Except for it's not a little bit; it's a lot.
Honestly, if actually now that I think about it, if we go back to like the jank in the game question, I think that's probably it.
Really?
Because like that was not an intended mechanic.
It
that
wasn't.
Just happened to be there. It was originally a bug. Because of how the jump and the gun knockback worked at the time. Where like I think the gun knockback is additive. So like if you jump, it sets your vertical speed to a certain distance, and then by shooting down, it gets added on top of that, which creates like the big jump. But that was not intended. But then obviously like it became a very fun mechanic. So then it became like.
Because I was gonna say that's like one of my favorite features. I kind of love that being accidental.
Yeah, that was not planned. Also, like on the note of like the platforming stuff. I think it's a little bit funny because I think someone at some point suggested like adding more like just pure platforming rooms because like the platforming is so fun in Revita. I'm like, let's just kick the roguelike mechanics and let's just make an entire platform.
And you could just straight up. There are very few platformers that I've played that feel as good as Revita does, and like I actively try and avoid platformers generally because I don't like them nowadays. Like,
yeah,
I'll play a Metroidvania platformer. Hollow Knight. You got double jumps. You got all sorts of cool moves for traversal. Like that works. But like I've tried to load up just basic pure run, jump on enemy head. Maybe you have a basic attack. It just doesn't feel good. The jumping is bad, the movement is weird, and the environments are boring. So yeah, if you wanted to turn Revita into like an actually really good platformer, you already have the framework for it. But mostly it just puts every other platformer to shame. I don't know. Let's see. I guess kind of in the same vein, beyond something you're proud of, what's a wholesome thing that you're like notably passionate about? This is much more just getting to know you as a person. But
what's a wholesome thing that I'm passionate about? I guess the I mean, I guess I could say like the like community aspects. Like for one, like obviously the Revita community. Like while there's sometimes like the community management can get like pretty tedious, pretty annoying because there's some back and forth and stuff. But generally speaking, like I'm super proud of like the community.
They're very
like,
well behaved.
Yeah, they're very well behaved. They're very welcoming.
That's good.
Generally a very diverse community, which just adds like to just like the personality of the community as a whole, which is very nice. But like also like sorry.
Oh no. You finish your thought, then I'll ask.
But yeah, like also the like I think the game dev community on Twitter as a whole is just like very nice, very like community driven, like very helpful, etc. Which I mean is one of the reasons why I am where I am. So yeah, game dev community and Revita community, right?
Yeah. So do you have like any very specific game developer friends? I think I've seen like one or two of them go by, but not overwhelmingly.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I am friends with like a lot of game developers. Like again, especially due to like the Twitter connections and stuff. So it's funny because like frequently like I can do like the funny humble brag where when I talk to other people I can be like, yeah, I know the person who worked in this game.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always funny.
Okay. Now, I assume this is kind of like more of global friendships, or did you meet any of them locally too?
Just via the internet.
Okay.
I live very much like in a place where there's, at least as far as I know, not really any game dev happening around in like the near vicinity.
Okay.
So yeah, very much globally.
Okay. Now, going back to kind of community and community management, so you haven't really had to deal with any bad eggs or anything like that?
I mean they
beyond like a handful
exist. Yeah, there's like obviously like sometimes some people join just to be garbage human beings. But like generally speaking, like there haven't really been any issues. To be fair, Revita is still quote unquote relatively on the smaller side.
Yeah.
So like I can imagine like if it gets like 5 times the user base, etc. Like
it could
then there
start
might
getting
be
kind of stinky here and there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mostly ask because I know from like a streamer and a YouTuber perspective, there was kind of this like, I'm not going to say this prevailing thing of you just kind of ignore the bad elements for a while. And then like proper community management is almost something that like catches a lot of creators, at least in my field, entirely by surprise. And everybody's just like, oh shoot, my audience is terrible. How do I fix this? And so I guess it's nice to see on your end that is, you don't have to deal with that. Because, yeah, for me, it was like a couple of years ago, I finally sat down and said, some of these fans need to go because they're bad, and I've been letting them get away with far too much.
Yeah, I mean to go a little bit deeper into that, I would assume you can probably relate to that. But like I think like one of the only issues and that I've encountered as well now, and while it's currently being a positive thing more or less, it could be negative, is like the whole parasocial relationship stuff.
Yeah.
Where like people assume just because like they interact with a product that you've made and are around you, and like for example like to bring it to like in my case where I'm active on the Ravita Discord and there are like a bunch of friends in there that I talk to like friends, that kind of gives like the impression that like everyone is kind of friends. And like while I appreciate that as like just a general thing, like that's not 100% the case. Like obviously, like the
Yeah.
people that are very active, like yeah, like sure, like I consider those people friends. But like when someone new comes in and they're trying to like immediately be buddy, and like I have to understand like if they're sarcastic about stuff, etc. Like it gets very tricky, and it also gets like very like tedious, annoying, and like sometimes like very damaging, because like for example like if a friend says like, hey, do this, and I'm like, I understand that because it's sarcasm and like we're friends, I can understand their type of humor. But like if a random person comes in and it's like, hey, fix this dot, and that's it, I'm like,
rude?
No, this is not
Rude.
okay. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I
so
definitely know
that's
that.
definitely
I've
a
had
problem.
people just show up to my streams and absolutely act like they've known me for years, because they probably do, but like I don't know who they are. I've never interacted with them. I don't know what their foibles are. I don't know how they even converse with people. So like when I do all caps, I'm mad, but for some people, when they do all caps, they're excited. And so like I can pick up on that if I've known a person for a while. But if it's some new person that just shows up on my stream or my Discord or my Twitter and starts, you know, talking in all caps, I'm just assuming they're yelling at me regardless of what they're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Just on the most basic, simplest terms. Yep. Parasocial relationships are rough. I'm so glad that there's like a gaining awareness of them, because like years ago, I'm going to say before some of those like video essays really explaining what parasocial relationships were, like I didn't know what they were, and it was much, much harder to like set those kind of mental boundaries on like, I can't talk to these people in this way because it's going to create that bad expectation and that kind of, I'm not going to say it's a toxic feedback loop, but it creates that toxic situation that is not healthy for either creator or consumer, for creator or fan. But
yeah, and I mean it's like and I would say we're like both in like the situation where it's like the big problem obviously being like that you also become like kind of like the product that you're selling in a sense.
Yep.
So it's like it becomes, you can't really separate yourself from that, because like for example like I can't like really like I can't be like, no, this is not okay, because like I am to some degree the thing that is being marketed at. So it's like it gets very tricky to like keep that balance. And it's like for a comparison, like the Revita community is like, I think that like the Discord is like currently like maybe like 1.2k people, and like that's already like getting difficult. Because like I can't, like this is a professional thing. I can't be buddy with everyone, because it will get to the point where once there are more people, that will get like very dangerous very quickly.
Yep. I have 3,000 people in my Discord, but it's very quiet. I've never actively like advertised it, especially on my YouTube channel. And I'm like, every once in a while, I'm like, I should advertise this and get some more people in here. And then I think about it for a while. I'm like, oh, that would be heck.
Yeah.
But it's like, really, is it worth it? What's the, what's the give and take? What's the happy medium? But I think some things you just kind of have to bite the bullet on. And potentially, I mean, as you get bigger, just having more community managers, I think, helps a lot. And also kind of finding spaces within your community as it gets bigger that can still feel like what it was beforehand, before it got busier. So, like, I have 1 or 2 chat rooms with, like, a couple of my fans that, like, I know aren't going to misbehave or be weird about anything. And so I can kind of retreat to that. So if the rest of the Discord gets weird, I can just be like, I'm just gonna live here now for a week, and that usually is kind of a nice little refresher.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I guess that's like kind of like the benefit of like especially in game development, of like a studio, because like as a studio you can kind of hide behind the studio name, which obviously has its benefits and negatives, but like when people scream, they're gonna scream at the studio and not the people, which again has its negatives. But like you have like a separation in between. As like an indie developer, you can't get away from that. Like you are the person people will speak to no matter what.
Yeah, I can see that being rough. I mean, I guess I have to deal with that constantly, but okay. I guess one last kind of pseudo-negative topic of,
Okay.
do you have many issues with, like, imposter syndrome?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think like especially in like the creative space, I'd be more surprised when people say like, no, I don't have any imposter syndrome whatsoever. Like, it's I mean I guess it comes mostly from just the fact that like at this point, especially with the internet, we're all like so connected that you can just see everyone being good at what they're doing, and that kind of creates this whole thing of like, because like you don't see like the hours that they've invested into their craft, etc., like their struggles. You just see product,
Yep.
and product is good. Therefore, my product needs to be good as well. Which obviously is not a great mindset, but you can't really escape it because like it's everywhere. But yeah, absolutely. Like there's a lot of things where I'm like, I wish I was this good. I think my stuff is nearly as good as this, etc. But I think I'm getting better about it. It was definitely a lot harder, like especially like due to Twitter, like when I started out with Twitter, where I was like very much focused on numbers, right?
Yep.
Where it was like, I need to market my game and I need to use this for marketing, so I need to up those numbers. And like that just gets like, is like a super bad feedback loop, like just in general. But it got to the point like where once I like hit like 10k, and like that's where the point where they stopped showing me like exact numbers, they just rounded. And since then I've been like, yeah, no, now I don't really care about it anymore.
That's nice.
And it's been a lot nicer since then. But yeah, so like imposter syndrome still there, not as bad. Because obviously also now I have a product I'm personally proud of. So I can be like, I know it might not be as good as other stuff, but like it's also not just my product. There are other people involved, and I can also be proud of their work. Which just helps.
That's good. I guess I'm one of those people that doesn't have imposter syndrome.
What?
Yeah. I got survivor's guilt. That's the thing that gets me.
Oh dang.
And so I know all of these other creators that I perceived as better than me, and their channels failed like years ago, and I'm just sitting there being like, how am I still here?
But isn't that some kind of like?
I guess so, but it's like I don't ever feel like I'm bad. One thing that's been helping me lately is I've been putting out shorts on YouTube ever since they added them. I've effectively TikTok clones,
right?
But like on the YouTube platform, and I've been putting them out, and I'm like, I'm really funny sometimes, and so like. I think the moment I started looking at those highlights and saying like, man, I'm actually like pretty good at this most of the time. There was a period of time I think where I was getting kind of complacent, you know, I was just putting in the time and then coming back. I think that was the part where I was starting to feel a slight imposter syndrome of just like, boy, I'm like terrible at this and I should like really start improving again. Which is actually why I'm doing this, I guess. Not from the perspective of like, you know, I don't feel like I deserve to be where I am, but more of just like, I stopped improving and trying to improve myself, and I think that was kind of the point where I started, I guess, losing touch.
Yeah, I think one thing that also just helps with imposter syndrome is like, and I mean it's harder to think about earlier, but like especially like for example, like in my case where like I am like now and like I have quite a bit of reach on like for example Twitter and stuff, and like when I think of like, oh, this person's so much better, like I can always also just consider like, no, there are also other people who would say the same thing about me, and like that goes like infinitely in both directions. So like there's not really a point to like worry much about it. Like even if you do end up worrying about it, but it's like I think like internalizing that it's like kind of like pointless to some degree to worry about it.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be people that are better than you.
Yeah.
No matter what you do. But also in the other direction.
That helps a lot. Just realizing that, yeah, you're never going to be top in it. That's okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Positive thing. What's a piece of merch that you'd like to sell, and what's an unrealistic piece of merch that you'd like to sell?
What does unrealistic piece of
I would
merch
love
mean?
to have a full-scale Wanderbot statue.
Okay.
Will I ever be able to make or sell that? Heck no, but it'd be cool.
That's tricky. I mean, one thing, like, no matter in what category that would go, one thing that I would absolutely love would be like a Revita kit plush, because who can ever say no to plushies?
A little
of,
plushie.
like,
Yeah, I've got a Turnip Boy plush, I think, in my mailbox that I gotta get after this.
Great.
Yeah?
So that is definitely like one of like my things on the bucket list. The question is that realistic or not? I don't know yet. We'll have to see.
I'd say that's within the realm of possibility. I mean, if Turnip Boy can get one, I would be surprised if Revita couldn't.
I'm thinking like what would be like something that would be like very over the top merch wise. I mean, one thing that I would love to do, and I don't know how much like that, if that might be a thing at some point, but one thing that I would love to do is like for example, Celeste had like the whole like B-sides thing. So they had like their main soundtrack, and then they had a copy of that soundtrack, but just remixes from like all kinds of composers.
Yeah.
Like I would absolutely love that. That is very expensive.
Yeah, I can imagine. Wandersong had that actually with its release. They had, I think it was 3 albums. So it was like the base 2, and then the last one was just all remixes. I'll admit I listened to the remixes like way more than the actual soundtrack at this point, but I could see that being cool. I think that would actually be really cool.
Yeah, that like I love like music stuff in games, and like that with like Celeste, I was like, God, I would love if that was a possibility.
Yeah. So
and who knows? I mean, could be possible, but yeah just
I think both of those are very achievable. The main issue is just funding.
Yeah.
So I guess quick aside, what kind of music do you listen to while you're working, or are you just like dead silence kind of person?
Well, I can tell you what I currently have in the background running, which is the Celeste soundtrack. So
Fair
I
enough.
think that explains a lot. I'm also like in the camp of like video game soundtracks.
Yeah, unfortunately in my house the Celeste soundtrack is banned because I listened to it too much, and my partner got tired of listening to the Celeste soundtrack. So now I can only listen to it when I have my headphones on, and even then. The soundtrack is so good.
Very good.
Anyway, I guess on the topic of unlimited money and unfeasible things, if you did have unlimited money, time, and employees, what would be a game that you would like to make?
I think like the pipe dream that every developer has to some degree is like, yeah, let's just make a big RPG.
Okay.
Because like those usually take a lot of money, a lot of like a big RPG. Like those take a lot of funding, a lot of people, just a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I mean, we talked about it earlier. Like I worked on a Paper Mario fan game thing. Like if I had the security and possibility to just work on like an RPG in that style, like a full scale RPG, I would absolutely do it. But it's just like those things are expensive.
Those are undertakings, and
yeah,
I don't want to call them risky necessarily, but RPGs. You have like, if you're worried about competition with roguelikes, I'd feel like RPGs are even worse in terms of just like trying to justify your existence.
I mean, I think it depends, right? Like if you have like a unique like mechanical thing, because I think one of the issues there is also that they kind of start blending together because like a lot of them at least feel like very mechanically similar and visually similar. Which, I mean, as long as you have, like, a unique thing for both of those...
Yeah, that's true.
I think there's a lot of potential there.
I will admit, I've been playing Disgaea 6 and really enjoying it because I'm not playing the game. They added auto-battling as just, like, a mechanic.
I saw that.
You program your characters and then just let them go, and it's just like... Yeah. I suddenly love this game because I'm not playing it, you know? All of those just boring tactical battles, I can be like, good luck, units, I believe in you. And they've been doing a great job with that, but... I would love to play like an XCOM auto battler. Oh, that would be really cool.
And the numbers go up? It's very funny.
Yeah. I'm not as connected to the whole numbers thing, but it's just like, I just, Pokemon, for example, I'm just so tired of just, like, fighting. It's like, alright, time to fight a random battle in the grass.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
If I could just tell my monsters, just go fight it. You know what you're doing. We've done this a billion times. Wipe the
To
floor
be
with
fair, that game
Zubat.
could very easily just add an auto mode for battles.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Man, I am actually running out of questions.
Dang.
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly I just need to write more, but we've also been talking for a little over an hour and a half, I think. So,
yeah,
that's a lot. So, I guess the last thing that I would like to ask, unless you have anything else you want to talk about, is why is Revita important, and, like, what kind of impact do you hope that it will have? Because, you know, whenever I'm playing a game, I'm always kind of thinking about the lessons that I want other games to learn from it. But even beyond that, you know, maybe it's story beats, some kind of character thing that, you know, I haven't seen yet, or just whatever.
So that's a very hard-hitting question.
I know.
I mean,
take your time.
Obviously, it's very important to me personally because like I've spent a lot of time of my life into this project, and at this point, it's very much my child. So like I have like a very big connection to the project itself. So it's very important to me, but like also in regards to like what impact I would like it to have, like on, for example, like similar games. Like one of the things, I mean, that could be an entire different conversation, but like one of the things that have been appearing more and more frequently in roguelites, which I do not like, is the need for like the whole we're padding out the game by adding like unnecessary artificial meta progression.
Yep.
Which like, hey, if you spend like an hour, your damage will go up by 1.
Yep.
Which is not going to do much, but if you spend 10 hours, then maybe you can defeat the second boss.
Yep.
I was like, that's just very yucky. I do not like it. It's almost in every roguelite now, and I get it's useful for stretching at game time, but it's just not fun. And as soon as you have like this, at least some degree of like this game developer or game analysis mindset of like, I see what this is doing, it gets very frustrating and annoying.
Yep. Like,
and if there's, yeah, sorry.
I was going to say, it works in a couple of games. Like, it's kind of satisfying in the last spell, for example. You know, you get X amount of currency, you unlock some new things. Suddenly you're a little stronger, you've unlocked some more stuff. But then there's, like, I'm going to say Gunfire Reborn, where you have to grind for at least 20 hours before you have a reasonable shot at even clearing a run. And that feels really gross to me.
Yeah, it's like a thing like if the game is built around that, that's fine. Like for example, like Rogue Legacy is like the obvious example. Like that game is entirely built around that meta progression. In that case, it's fine because like every mechanic plays with that in mind. But like for example, I mean, I know people don't like when I say that, but like one of the reasons I, for example, am not that big on Hades is like the whole meta progression thing. It feels like very like tagged on as like a way to like, oh, we're gonna increase like playtime in general, like stuff to do, just so there's more stuff to do. And like there's a lot of roguelites nowadays that adapt a very similar thing because like one big game did that, so now we apparently all have to do this. And it's like, yeah, but that game might have worked because like there are other things that work in that game. Like for example, like Hades, obviously the big pull for that game is like the art, which is fantastic, and also like the writing, which is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like the world building and stuff. But that doesn't mean everything in that game is perfect. And I mean, that's obviously also not expected because no game is perfect. But like a lot of a big issue I see at the moment is like, especially in roguelites, because I mean, that's where I'm working in. Like people see like, oh, this game is big, so now we just adapt all of that. And it becomes messy very quickly. Where it's like I think like without naming any names, but I've heard someone who talked to some developers and basically asked them like, hey, I don't like this, like why is this meta progression there? Like I don't see a reason like why I shouldn't be able to do this thing. Like why am I bound by this meta progression to like progress? And their argument was basically like, yeah, so the players play longer.
Yeah.
That's just not good design.
feels so bad when I run across games like that, and I will either cheat to the end or just move away.
Yeah,
I said this yesterday,
fun.
but like the thing I love so much about Revita is that it is kind of like, I'm not going to say it's a perfect quick play because it's not that quick anymore, but like I load it up, I do a run, and maybe I unlock some items that I can use on the next run, but beyond that, it's just there's no extra fuss that I really need to be like, all right, I've earned X number of coinage, now I can raise my damage by 10% so I can maybe beat depression. Like,
Yeah, it's like, and I mean that was definitely like one of the things I wanted to focus on. Like my principle in general when it comes to meta progression and works is like, if I add meta progression, I wanted to add more variety to the game. Like, sure, do we have some of that meta progression stuff because I think it's funny? Yes. Like for example, like how you can unlock the torches in each area, which give you like 6 soul in general.
I really
which
need
is
to
not
start
much.
working on.
And it doesn't do much, and they're also not very pricey, but I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, otherwise there's not a lot there. And I mean, I know like one of the recent reviews was like, oh, the currencies feel a bit grindy, and I'm like, that's just like, that's not on purpose. Like at the moment, like a lot of the later update unlocks, like for example the unlocks from the last update, like they cost around like 100 coins. Which, because I was like, yeah, I mean, you probably have like around that when you get there, like, unknowing that like, no, people will get there much quicker than you're anticipating. Which is just, I mean, the game is in early access, that's just natural.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I want to add more variety with like the meta progression. And I want people to play more because the game gets more interesting, because the game gets more fun, not because the people feel like they have to keep playing, otherwise they're not going to make any progress.
Skinner box mentality is rough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I for one really appreciate that you're paying attention to that. I honestly hope most other roguelike developers know that too. I mean, I guess I kind of saw that specifically with the Undermine developers, that they started with a really heavy meta progression, and then decided to switch away for a non-meta progression version, and now I don't play the meta progression version anymore because it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, that was like one of my big issues with that game. I was like, this game looks very neat and it has a lot of neat stuff, but God, do I not like the meta progression at all, because it's very gatekeepy and it's just not great.
It wasn't even that bad for the most part. The problem I ended up with was I couldn't figure out what the happy medium difficulty was. Because like with Rogue Legacy, you just keep grinding until you beat the game, and then you're kind of just done. There's no real expectation to keep playing Rogue Legacy unless you want to go on to New Game Plus, at which point it raises everything evenly. But with Undermine, I ran into this issue of like I couldn't figure out what ascension level was like comfortable. And the meta progression just threw everything off, and so like I'd be able to clear the first like 3-4 floors like cakewalk, no problem. And then I get to the final floor, and it's like, oh yeah, this is impossible. All right, I'll lower the difficulty, and then it turned everything into cakewalk except for the last level, and then it's just like, this doesn't feel good. But
yeah, I think like what the thing that threw me off was kind of like more so like very early on, like I think it was the first boss, where if you get there like without upgrades, like you do like teensy tiny damage. It's like it's just
hard.
A giant health sponge. I'm like, yeah, I see what's happening here, and I do not like this.
Yep.
I can understand why people do this. It's like the thing of like, I get it, like especially like indie developers where it's like, we're kind of scared that people jump ship too quickly, and it's like, I get that, but this doesn't help.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy that they added like the whole other mine mode, which seems very cool.
Yeah, and pretty much solves at least those issues. The enemy, the bosses are still pretty dang tough, but that's kind of its own thing. Yeah. Anyway, I guess you know what? Let's close out with a completely random question.
Okay.
What is your default foot state? Socks, shoes, sandals, slippers, or just barefoot?
Definitely socks.
You are a socks kind of guy. You got any kind of like specific sock that you care about, or is it just like, whatever socks?
Just whatever.
Okay. I'm a barefoot guy, but if I wear socks, I either have to have like really nice, like light sporty socks, or like really comfy wool socks. But nothing else works for me. Just the basic kind of scratchy cotton socks drive me nuts. Cool to know. I'm just gonna ask everybody that question at the end of this. Just compile some kind of list of like game developers prefer socks. Why? I don't know. Anyway,
It's just like a data bank and like
yeah, I
like,
love arbitrary
web
data like that. That
references.
means nothing. It's just like game developers overwhelmingly prefer to just wear socks. Why? I don't know. I'm not gonna think about this any more than you know, just this surface level thing. But now that I know, I appreciate knowing.
Deeper meaning is if you want to become a game developer, you have to wear socks.
You have to be a socks person. Yeah.
That's
Otherwise,
the base requirement.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me for this. Sorry for that being the last question, but I don't know, it was a nice way to close things all the same. Let's see.
Yeah.
So, I guess for those of you that have been listening to this the entire time, Revita has been out in early access for only since March? Wow, time is weird. But you just put out a fairly big patch back at the end of June, and then you just put out a rebalance beta that I really liked. I think it was mostly you redid the shards, yes?
No.
So it was more than that.
So the big, like, for one, the shards, because people were not super happy with them. So I did some tweaking there, added some benefits and stuff.
Yeah,
which
I like
adds
that.
some more spice. Like if you play on higher shards, game is going to be more difficult, but you generally also find a lot more weird, wacky stuff, which like kind of makes it easier, but also like it just makes it riskier, which I think is very fun.
That's
but also sorry.
I was just gonna say that's huge for me. I usually hate ascension systems because it's like, hey, what if the fun parts went away and then you just had the hard parts? And it's like, no. But yeah, seeing that you had kind of like pluses and negatives to the shards sounds really good to me.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like to be honest, like the big thing about the Ascension system originally, it was a very late edition. It was like a thing where it was like so weird, like because like it's in early access, it's like, oh, there's like for people who want to play more, like there is just more stuff to do. And like now as we progress through the early access, it's slowly being like rebalanced and readjusted to work like better in like a full game kind of setup. But the other stuff that the big stuff actually that changed in the update was like the rarity on stuff. So like or the frequency of rarities.
I saw that getting certain items would increase my relic rarity or relic level or something. Anyway, you can keep describing.
To be fair, that was a thing that was in before. The big thing that changed was like the statues previously, like you could just get 3 commons. Which does not feel great.
Yeah.
And they could also just be worthless. Like you could have like an item that's like, oh, enemies take damage when you get hit. Great. You could have an item that's like, oh, enemies freezes when you get hit. And like another one that's just enemies do stuff when you get hit. And like just very weak, and it's like, this is not very interesting. Now I'm gonna skip this.
Yeah.
And the big change that we did was, for one, the game now for common items prioritizes stuff that changes up your build. So like for example, like stat ups are actually not in that pool. So like you're gonna very rarely see stat ups, and more like things like bouncy bullets or like.
That would explain why I saw a lot of bouncy bullets.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously those pools get bigger and bigger as you unlock more items. But the other big change was that like the third item in each statue is now guaranteed to be a rare, and the general rates of rares have been drastically increased. So now you just get very funky runs very quickly, which makes the game easier to some degree, but also just makes the game more fun.
Yeah, more memorable, really.
Yeah, it makes the runs way more different than just having like the same roughly common items that don't do much anyway.
Okay. That's a lot bigger of a patch than I thought it was going to be. I almost kind of feel like it deserves, I'm not going to say its own like branding, but like that's big stuff. Even if like maybe not on a front facing level, everybody's just like, oh, it's just a rebalance. It's like, no, that changes a lot.
It was actually originally supposed to be part of the next content update, but then I was like, no, I actually kind of want to get that out as quickly as possible and have people test it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
Because the
huge...
next content update is still out for quite a while.
Yeah,
Like,
so sometime in the fall then?
maybe sooner. We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, I know when. I can't say it. But
Oh, fair enough.
It's quite a bit sooner than that, but it's
Okay.
not like the next week or something. So I was like, I want to get this out, especially because like that's been the biggest like critique point. Like that's actually like a critique point that can be worked with in the negative reviews. And as I'm like a big people pleaser who's like, I don't want anyone to be unhappy with anything. I was like, no, okay, I understand now that this is an issue, and I want to get this fixed as quickly as possible. So I made it its extra branch.
Thanks so much for doing so, because, yeah, even just playing around with it a little bit yesterday, it definitely felt better picking items in the statue. I mean, you could see that because I kept killing myself for it. Anyway, so I guess just to finish closing things out, so big patch kind of coming soon, sooner than later, but we'll find out. But yeah, otherwise, Revita's on Steam, has been on Steam for a while. It's $15, which is more than reasonable. That's a great price. But with all that, thank you so much for joining me today, Benstar. This is really fun and really casual. Yeah. And
it's been a joy.
Yeah. You also have a very good microphone. That was always one of my fears of just like, developers might not have good mics. But no, your mic.
You know what?
You are on par with everybody else. Yeah.
I have to go on a tangent about this.
Okay.
Because I have to spill a secret. This is like, so this microphone, because I'm cheap as get. This is like a $10 microphone that was included in like as a Wii accessory like years ago.
Really?
Yes.
All right, there's your most jank thing that you've done. That is impressive. Because, yeah, you sound fine. You sound more than fine. I mean, obviously, like, if you had, like, a really good microphone, you'd probably sound like a completely different person. But, as far as, like, you know, what I'm doing, like, I have worked with creators with far worse microphones than yours. I have had far worse microphones than yours. I started on a laptop mic, and that was a terrible idea. Anyway. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the audio quality, even if it is just a wee microphone. Anyway. So, once again, thank you so much for joining me, and I will have links to everything in the description below. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Before we go, I should probably put out a bit of a call, a question, a suggestion box of some sort. If any of you guys know of a developer that you would like to see me interview, or at least try and reach out for an interview, let me know in the comments below. I don't want to take too much away from Revita, but I'd love to know who I should be looking out for to talk to next. Anyway, with all that said, please go check out Revita on Steam. It's an absolutely fantastic little game. It's full of heart. It's really hard unless you don't want it to be, and it's really fun too. So, with all that said, once again, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.